She never spoke. Not a single word, until a stray dog appeared beside her under the festival lights. What brought a silent girl, a grieving old man, and a forgotten dog together? And how did one wooden lantern change the voice of an entire town? Stay with this story, because sometimes, it's not what's said that saves us. It's who stays when the words are gone. The town of Willowfield, Tennessee, rested in the bowl of the low Appalachian foothills, where fog draped the valley like a half-remembered dream and the air smelled of pine resin and distant rivers. That summer night, the clouds had cleared just in time for the annual Lantern Festival, a celebration held beneath a sky of fireflies and hand-painted paper lanterns, glowing like stars shaken loose from the heavens. The smell of funnel cake, roasted corn, and cherry cola drifted through the air as laughter and fiddles mingled above the cobblestone streets. Lila Monroe, 8 years old, stood at the edge of the lantern-lit crowd, her tiny hand gripping the frayed edge of her grandmother's shawl. Lila was slight for her age, with wispy chestnut hair cut just below her chin and pale skin that seemed to glow faintly in the lantern light. Her eyes were large, hazel, and spoke in volumes, for Lila had not spoken a word since the age of 4. The doctors called it selective mutism, but her grandmother always said she simply spoke through the world instead. Her clothes were modest, denim overalls over a faded yellow t-shirt with a butterfly sewn onto the chest, a hand-me-down from the church bin. On her left wrist was a purple cloth bracelet with her name embroidered in crooked pink thread, Lila, a gift her grandmother had made for her last birthday. That grandmother, Eudora Monroe, was a sturdy woman in her early 70s, with a hunched back from decades working as a seamstress and a fierce gray bun tied high like a crown. She had the no-nonsense gaze of a woman who had weathered the Dust Bowl, 3 husbands, and a fire that took her home but spared her faith. Her grip was strong, until a child bumped into her, causing her to let go of Lila's wrist for only a second. In that moment, as the crowd pressed like waves, Lila was swept forward and her grandmother was gone. She turned in a full circle. All she could see were legs, boots, skirts, sneakers, a sea of them. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. She raised her arms, but no one saw. She clutched her bracelet and stepped back into the shadows of a vendor stall that had long closed for the evening. The festival carried on around her. Children let go of glowing lanterns into the night sky, watching them drift upward with giggles and shouts. But Lila watched from under a wooden table, curled like a rabbit beneath a bush, invisible in plain sight. That's when she saw him. The dog was a mess, mud-caked fur, limping slightly, one ear bent awkwardly forward. He was a golden retriever, or had once been. His coat, once golden and proud, now dulled to the color of old straw, and his eyes held the cautious wisdom of an animal who had once known family but now lived on guesswork and instinct. He was about 2 years old, gangly yet strong, with a large scar along his right flank. His ribs hinted beneath his fur like the memory of hunger. He was sniffing around the food stalls, nosing at a half-eaten pretzel left on a bench. When his eyes caught Lila's, something paused in the dog. His tail, which had been stiff and unsure, began to wag slowly, then more confidently. He crept toward her, his belly low to the ground, as if asking permission to be seen. Lila didn't move. She watched him the way you watch a leaf drift onto your lap, not afraid, just quietly astonished that it chose her. The dog, later she would call him Sonny, sniffed her knees, then sat down beside her and let out a soft, almost human sigh. He didn't bark. Didn't growl. Just sat, his warmth steady against her side, as if to say, I know what it is to be lost. Across the festival, a tall, thin boy named Jasper Reynolds was lugging a crate of lemons back to his mother's lemonade stand. Jasper was 12 and had the restless energy of a spring-loaded jack. His skin was coppery from long days outdoors, and his dark blonde curls refused to stay under his baseball cap. He was a chatterbox and a doodler. Half the wooden crates at the stand had little dragons or racing cars etched into them. He helped his mother work the stall every summer to save up for a telescope, which he insisted would one day help him discover a comet. As he crouched down to pick up a dropped lemon, he spotted something glinting beneath his stand. He reached for it, only to find a soft purple bracelet, its cloth damp with grass dew. "Lila," it read. Jasper glanced up. No one in the nearby crowd seemed to be searching. He frowned, shoved the bracelet into his hoodie pocket, and made a mental note to ask around after the rush. Back beneath the table, Lila was gently petting the dog's ragged fur. He thumped his tail in time with her strokes. She looked out into the lights. The stalls were slowly being packed away. She didn't see her grandmother. She didn't know where to go. But the dog nudged her hand, then stood up and trotted a few paces forward. He paused, turned his head, and barked once, soft, low, almost musical. Lila hesitated. Then stood. She reached for his ear, scratched it, and gave a small nod. It wasn't language. But he understood. They slipped between carts, over hay bales, and into the alleyways behind the main square. As the last lanterns lifted into the sky, Lila and Sunny disappeared into the dark outline of trees beyond the edge of the town. And no one saw them go. By morning, the skies above Willowfield, Tennessee, had turned a pale gray, like someone had brushed ash across the heavens. Mist clung to the fields and sidewalks, and the dew that settled overnight left a silver sheen on the grass, as though the earth itself were holding its breath. The Lantern Festival's laughter and music were now a memory, replaced by the hush of early day. Most of the vendors had already packed and gone, leaving only faint chalk drawings on the cobblestone and a few drifting scraps of tissue paper caught in the bushes. Lila Monroe walked silently along the wooded path just outside the market's perimeter, her canvas shoes damp from the wet grass. Sunny, the ragged golden retriever, led the way with a quiet confidence, his nose brushing along the forest floor. The occasional bird call echoed in the distance, but aside from that, the woods were still. Lila glanced around, unsure where they were going, but her trust in the dog had already begun to take root. Sunny, roughly 2 years old, had the hesitant gait of a dog not used to being followed. His ribs still showed, and patches of burrs clung to his fur. Yet there was purpose in his movements, and something almost protective in the way he'd occasionally glance back at the little girl walking behind him. He wasn't just leading, he was watching over her. They came across an old wooden bridge, barely a dozen feet long, stretched over a dry creek bed. Sunny stopped there, sniffed the boards, then barked once. Lila hesitated. Her hands hovered in the air, miming indecision. Then she knelt and began drawing in the dirt with her fingers. She drew a circle, then a stick figure with frizzy hair and a long skirt, her grandmother. Next to it, she drew a heart. She looked up at Sunny. The dog tilted his head. Then, to her astonishment, Sunny walked to her drawing, sniffed it, and began pawing gently at the dirt until the heart smeared. He looked up and wagged his tail. Lila didn't smile often, but her lips twitched upward. She touched her own chest, then tapped the stick figure. Sunny gave a low woof and nudged her knee. It wasn't speech. But it was enough. Back in the heart of Willowfield, Jasper Reynolds stood outside the lemonade stand where he had spent nearly every weekend of the summer. The stand itself was painted a cheery yellow, though the paint had begun to peel near the base. His mother, Luann Reynolds, was a thin woman in her mid-30s with sun-worn skin, auburn curls pulled into a permanent messy bun, and tired blue eyes that still managed to smile whenever Jasper talked about space. She wore a Moon Pie Festival 2019 t-shirt under an apron covered in lemon stains. "You're sure it said Lila?" she asked, pouring hot water into a thermos. "Yeah. Purple cloth bracelet. Looked handmade," Jasper replied, bouncing slightly on his heels. "I think I saw her. A little girl with brown hair, around 8. I saw her last night with a dog. They were heading toward the woods." Luann raised an eyebrow. "With a dog? You sure it wasn't just another festival act? One of those animal trainers?" Jasper shook his head. "No. She looked like she was alone." The dog didn't have a leash or anything. And she wasn't talking. I waved, and she didn't even look at me. His mother set the thermos down and looked toward the treeline. You should tell someone, sweetheart. Sheriff Boyd maybe. If that girl's lost, they'll want to know. Jasper hesitated. He didn't trust grown-ups to act fast unless things were on fire. But something about the look on the girl's face the night before haunted him. So he nodded, stuffed the bracelet back into his pocket, and took off running down Main Street toward the sheriff's office. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ridge, Harvey Clyde adjusted the strap of his old leather satchel and shut the gate to his property. The morning chill had crept into his bones, and he wore a thick flannel jacket, patched at the elbows, over worn jeans and scuffed boots. At 68, Harvey had the wiry frame of a man who'd chopped more wood than he'd shaken hands. His hair was silver and cropped close, his beard trimmed neatly, though his eyes, blue and lined with years of sorrow, looked like they hadn't rested in a long while. His cabin stood nestled at the edge of a maple grove, modest and surrounded by old wood sculptures he'd carved himself, birds, squirrels, even a horse mid-gallop. He had lived alone there since his daughter June's death in a car accident 18 months prior. She had been his only child, and Sunny, her dog, had run off the day of her funeral. He thought Sunny had died. But now, as he looked down at the paw prints near the edge of the woods, his heart leapt. The prints were fresh. Too fresh. And beside them, small shoe prints. A child. Harvey took a breath and followed. Back in the woods, Lila and Sunny came upon a clearing where broken lanterns from the night before lay in soft grass. Lila picked one up. It was yellow, shaped like a flower, its paper damp but still intact. She turned it over in her hands, then looked up. The trees parted just enough for sunlight to shimmer down, catching her hair like copper. Sunny barked suddenly. She turned. Behind them, just beyond the trees, someone approached. Harvey stopped at the edge of the clearing. For a moment, none of them moved. Lila took a half-step back. Sunny stood between her and the man. Harvey didn't speak. He knelt slowly, his voice low and rough. Sunny. That you, boy? The dog turned, ears perking. He took a cautious step forward, sniffed the air, then let out a strange, high whimper. In a blink, Sunny bounded toward Harvey, tail whipping wildly. Harvey dropped his satchel and buried his face in Sunny's neck. You came back, you really came back. Lila stood frozen. Harvey looked up, his eyes softening. Hey there. Lila didn't answer. Her hands stayed curled at her sides. Harvey noticed. You don't talk, do you? That's all right. You don't have to. You're safe now. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small carved bird, smooth oak, wings extended. He held it out. Lila stared, then stepped forward and took it. Sunny sat beside her again. Harvey stood. Let's get you both inside before the next rain comes. Lila hesitated, then nodded. And just like that, she followed. Behind them, the first raindrop fell on a crumpled paper lantern, resting like a lost star in the grass. The rain came gently at first, tapping against the wooden shingles of Harvey Clyde's cabin like fingertips against an old piano. Nestled in the clearing beyond the trees, the cabin looked as if it had grown from the forest itself, its dark wood walls hugged by ivy, the windows small and uneven, and the chimney leaning just slightly like a weary man. Inside, the scent of cedar smoke and damp earth mingled in the air. Harvey placed a wool blanket over Lila's shoulders as she sat near the fireplace, her eyes scanning the room like a quiet archaeologist. She sat cross-legged on a worn rug, still damp from the walk. Sunny lay beside her, head on his paws, breathing slow and steady. The fire crackled, giving the room a warm flickering pulse. Harvey crouched beside the hearth, stirring a pot of vegetable soup. You like carrots? He asked gently, not expecting a reply. Lila didn't nod, but she didn't recoil either. She simply watched the steam rise like a signal from some far-off world. Harvey, 68 and long since retired from his work as a woodcarver, had spent the last year making small animals from driftwood and oak, mostly to keep his hands busy. A row of carvings lined the mantel: a fox, a swan, a turtle, a bear with a flower in its mouth. The carved bird he had given Lila now rested in her lap, her fingers tracing its wings over and over. "You don't have to talk," he said after a while, sitting in a creaky rocking chair. "I figure you've said plenty already, just not in words." The storm outside grew louder. Rain danced on the tin porch roof. Thunder rolled gently in the distance like a tired drum. Meanwhile, in Willowfield's modest sheriff's office, Sheriff Boyd sat behind a cluttered desk littered with half-empty coffee cups and flyers from the festival. Boyd was a man in his 50s with a thick mustache, a sun-creased face, and a voice that usually didn't rise above a drawl. He was about to open a pack of beef jerky when the door burst open. Jasper Reynolds, still out of breath from running, waved the purple bracelet wildly. "Sheriff. I think a girl is missing. Her name's Lila. I found this." Boyd leaned back. "Slow down, son. Lila, you say?" Jasper nodded. "She was at the festival. Brown hair, about 8. She wasn't talking. She had a dog with her. I think they went into the woods." Boyd stood slowly, the creak of his chair loud in the small room. "All right. Let's start with where you saw her last." He radioed 2 deputies and called in Luann to verify the details. Within an hour, a search party had formed, small but determined, with flashlights, rain ponchos, and boots stomping through the mud. Back at the cabin, Harvey ladled soup into 2 chipped bowls. He placed one near Lila, who eyed it cautiously before taking a careful sip. Sonny wagged his tail but stayed lying down, content with the heat and quiet. Harvey cleared his throat. "Sonny was my daughter's. Her name was June. She had your same kind of quiet about her. Said more with her drawings than I ever could with my mouth." Lila's eyes lifted. "She passed," he continued, softer now. "About a year and a half ago. Car wreck. After the funeral, Sonny disappeared. I thought he'd gone looking for her." Lila set her bowl down and crawled across the rug. She found a corner of ash and used her fingers to draw on the wooden floor. First, a small house. Then, a stick figure girl with a dog. Then a man with a beard. Then a star. Harvey watched her, stunned. "You saw her, didn't you?" he whispered. Lila nodded. Sonny barked once. Not loud. Almost a whisper of a bark. Harvey knelt and added a drawing of his own, a carving knife beside the girl. Lila's eyes widened, then softened. She reached for a stub of charcoal from the hearth and drew a second star beside the first. The search party, meanwhile, had reached the forest edge. Jasper, bundled in his raincoat, pointed toward the same bridge Lila and Sonny had crossed. "There," he said. "I saw her near there." Boyd motioned for the team to fan out. They called her name into the wet woods. The rain made it hard to hear, and the trees swallowed sound like secrets. But Sonny heard. Back in the cabin, his ears perked. He stood suddenly, tail rigid, and growled low, not in fear, but alertness. Lila stood too. "What is it, boy?" Harvey asked. Then they heard it. A faint shout. "Lila!" Sonny barked once, then ran to the door. Harvey looked at the girl. "You know them?" Lila nodded quickly, face alight. Harvey opened the door, and all 3 of them stepped out into the rain. The woods swallowed them for a moment, then released them. And just ahead, flashlights broke through the fog. The rain hadn't let up by the time they reached the edge of the clearing. It fell in thin, silvery threads, catching on the brims of ponchos and the tips of flashlight beams. Willowfield's forest, usually so calm and inviting, now looked like a world from another time, muddy paths winding between soaked trunks, leaves dripping like old faucet taps. But none of that stopped Lila from breaking into a run when she saw the first glimmer of movement through the trees. "Lila!" Jasper shouted, his voice cracking with relief. He emerged from the fog with Sheriff Boyd close behind, both of them soaked to the bone. Jasper had his rain hood down, his hair flattened like wet straw, and the moment he saw her, his face split into a grin. "You're okay." Lila didn't speak, she didn't need to. She ran straight toward him, skidding a little in the mud before stopping just close enough to not touch. Sonny bounded behind her, tail whipping. Jasper's grin faltered when he saw her expression, wide-eyed, guarded, yet open. Sheriff Boyd, tall and broad-shouldered, approached slower. "You all right, sweetheart?" he asked. "You lost?" Lila glanced at Harvey, who stood just behind her, rainwater running down his beard. "She's been staying with me," Harvey said. "Just overnight. Found her wandering the edge of my property with that dog. We were headed to find you when we heard shouting." Boyd studied Harvey for a long second. "Harvey Clyde, right?" "Yes, sir." Jasper turned to the sheriff. "She had this on." He pulled the purple cloth bracelet from his pocket, handing it over. Boyd looked at it, then at Lila. "This yours?" She nodded slowly. Boyd exhaled. "We've been looking all over. Her grandma's worried sick. Ambulance is waiting at the edge of town. Let's get her back." Lila hesitated. Her hand reached down, resting on Sonny's head. The dog pressed into her leg. Harvey stepped forward. "I'll come too." Boyd gave a nod. "Of course." They walked slowly out of the woods, the rain easing into a fine mist. Luann was waiting at the roadside, umbrella shaking in her hand, eyes wild. When she saw Jasper with Lila, she dropped the umbrella and ran to them. "Oh Lord, thank God," she whispered, kneeling and wrapping her arms around Lila without hesitation. The girl didn't pull away, she simply leaned into the warmth. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Lila reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the wooden bird Harvey had carved. She placed it in Luann's hand. The woman looked at it, then at Harvey. "She was safe," he said quietly. Didn't say a word, but she never needed to. The ambulance ride was short. Paramedics checked Lila's pulse, her temperature, her hands. She didn't cry. When asked if she hurt anywhere, she shook her head. The dog, they noted, stayed by her feet the entire time, unmoving. By noon, Lila was reunited with her grandmother at the community health center. Eudora Monroe had dark circles under her eyes and her hands shook, but the moment she saw Lila, she folded to her knees with a cry of gratitude. Lila clung to her, the way morning glories cling to fences, and didn't let go. Sonny sat nearby, watching, his ears twitching. Later that day, Jasper returned to the lemonade stand, this time with Sonny at his side. His mother raised a brow but said nothing as Jasper opened the old crate he used for his astronomy books. Inside was a small towel, a bag of kibble he had saved from last year's shelter drive, and a note. He set it all down in the corner of the stand and looked at Sonny. "You can stay here if you want," he said. "Just until you figure things out." Sonny looked at him, blinked once, then lay down with a soft grunt. That night, under the soft lights of the now quiet festival grounds, Jasper watched the sky through his telescope. He didn't find a comet. But he found peace. And from the porch of a maple cabin, Harvey sat with a mug of tea, whittling a new bird, this one, wings open wide, not in flight, but in welcome. The storm passed overnight, leaving behind the scent of wet earth and magnolia blossoms revived by the rain. Willowfield, Tennessee, awoke to a sky so blue it seemed freshly painted. The festival grounds looked like a watercolor, colors soft and runny, puddles reflecting lantern strings still hanging limp between poles. The final day of the lantern celebration was meant to be for cleanup, but townsfolk arrived anyway, drawn back by instinct, curiosity, and a lingering sense of unfinished magic. At the lemonade stand, Jasper was already up, his rain jacket tied around his waist and his arms elbow-deep in a tub of lemons. Sunny lay nearby, head resting on folded paws, his coat slightly cleaner thanks to a careful rinse from the backyard hose. The dog was still wary, but no longer uncertain. He watched the comings and goings with the silent calm of someone who had chosen, finally, to stay put. Jasper's mother, Luann, stood behind him, drying glass jars. "So what's your plan with him?" she asked casually, her eyes scanning Sunny's golden fur. "I don't know," Jasper replied. "But I think he wants to be here. For now." Luann nodded. "Dogs are like that. Sometimes they just know where they're needed before we do." At the Monroe home on Sycamore Lane, Lila sat on the front porch in a clean cotton dress, her bare feet swinging slightly off the wooden step. Her grandmother, Eudora, was inside on the phone, likely thanking yet another neighbor for their help during the search. But Lila wasn't listening. She was drawing. A new notebook lay across her lap, pages crisp, the cover embossed with gold stars. On the first page, she had drawn a cabin, a dog, and a man with a crooked beard holding a bird. Above them floated small lanterns with long, trailing strings. Eudora stepped out with a plate of toast and apple slices, her weathered face softer now. "You sure you don't want to rest more?" Lila shook her head. "You want to go back to the market this afternoon?" Another shake. "You want someone to visit you?" This time, Lila looked up. She nodded. Eudora smiled. "I thought so." By late afternoon, Harvey Clyde walked slowly up the Monroe driveway, a wrapped bundle in his hands. He wore a clean flannel shirt and slacks, his beard freshly trimmed. He looked like a man trying to meet the world halfway again. Lila met him at the gate. "Made something for you," he said, offering the cloth bundle. Lila unwrapped it carefully, a wooden lantern, delicately carved, with shapes of stars, birds, and trees etched into each panel. Harvey scratched the back of his neck. "It's not real glass, just old acetate sheets. But it'll catch the light." Lila beamed, her smile soft but unmistakable. She took his hand and led him to the porch. That evening, Jasper, Sunny, Harvey, and Lila sat together beneath the paper lanterns Eudora had strung across the front yard. Luann brought lemon cookies and raspberry tea. No one said much. They didn't need to. As the sky darkened, Lila placed a small electric candle inside the carved lantern and set it near the porch railing. Its glow flickered across their faces. Somewhere nearby, a fiddle began playing. A neighbor practicing, perhaps. The melody was old, soft, wandering. And in that moment, under the gentle hum of dusk, the festival didn't end. It simply changed shape, and stayed. A week passed. The lanterns were taken down from Willowfield's Market Square, the vendors moved on, and the stage was packed away into storage. But something had stayed behind, less visible than decorations, more lasting than music. A hush had settled over the town, a kind of reverence, as if everyone had glimpsed something fragile and didn't want to break it. Lila Monroe began to speak again, not all at once, not loudly. But one morning, as Eudora poured orange juice, Lila whispered, "Thank you." It was barely more than a breath, but it made the old woman drop the glass. She didn't cry. She laughed. A sound richer than anything the girl had ever heard. Later that day, Lila walked to the lemonade stand by herself. She wore a yellow scarf and carried the carved lantern Harvey had given her. Sunny trotted at her side, now healthy-looking, with a new blue collar. Jasper spotted her first. "Hey," he waved, then quieted when he saw the expression on her face. Calm. Centered. Like someone who'd found a lighthouse inside herself. She reached the stand, set the lantern down, and with a small smile, signed something with her fingers. Jasper blinked. "You're teaching me now?" Lila nodded. Then, she whispered, "Thank you." Jasper's mouth fell open. Then he grinned. "You're welcome." At the edge of town, Harvey sat on his porch sanding a new piece of cedar. His hands no longer shook when he carved. In the yard, a small post had been added beside his mailbox. On it hung a sign, "Whittling lessons, no talking required." Children had begun to visit. 1 or 2 a day, shy at first. He'd teach them to shape birds, stars, even tiny houses. He never asked why they came. He just showed them how to begin. Sunny often joined him on the porch in the afternoons, especially on days when the wind carried laughter from Sycamore Lane. The night before school started again, a final gathering took place. Eudora, Luann, Jasper, Lila, Harvey, and a handful of neighbors returned to the Monroe porch. No one planned it. They just came. Harvey brought a new lantern, this one larger, painted with gold dust and carved with Lila's name. Lila had brought her notebook, pages now filled with drawings, the forest, the bridge, Sunny, Jasper, and Harvey with his gentle eyes. As dusk fell, they lit the lanterns, one by one, and placed them in a circle on the lawn. No fire, just warm electric light. Safe. Still beautiful. They didn't speak of fear or loss. They spoke of birds that never stopped flying, of dogs who remembered home, and of silence that sometimes held more love than 1,000 words. When it grew late, Lila stood and walked to the middle of the lanterns. She looked at each person, then whispered, "I'm not lost anymore." And under the soft Tennessee sky, the lanterns glowed, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Just like her. In a world that often rushes to speak, whispers beneath the lantern sky, reminds us of the quiet power of presence, of listening, and of healing that blooms in silence. Sometimes, the most broken voices are the ones that teach us how to listen, with our hearts. Whether it's a child relearning trust, a man finding peace in shared stillness, or a dog who never stopped waiting, this story is a quiet prayer for anyone who's ever felt forgotten. If you believe in second chances, in light that never goes out, then share this story. And may the soft glow of compassion always guide your way forward. Comment Amen if you've ever been saved by something unspoken.